History is not the simple story we were taught. The ground beneath us holds relics that defy logic and challenge every chapter in our textbooks. By the end of this journey, you will see 30 pieces of evidence that could force a complete rewrite of the human story. We will examine a 2,000-year-old computer, a map that shows continents no one should have known, and stones that whisper of impossibly ancient hands. What common thread connects these strange objects scattered across time and space? This widely accepted timeline feels reassuringly solid, a staircase of progress we can all climb together. We moved from simple stone tools to farming villages, from those villages to grand cities, and from those cities to the empires that shaped our modern world. This is the story enshrined in textbooks, a narrative of linear human advancement where each new invention logically follows the last. But this framework is not just a collection of facts, it is an interpretation. Like a puzzle solver who only uses pieces that fit a preconceived picture, mainstream historical study has at times emphasized discoveries that neatly support the established chronology. What happens then when we dig up a piece that belongs to a completely different puzzle? This is where we encounter the anomaly. An anomaly is not necessarily proof of aliens or lost super civilizations, though such ideas often rush in to fill the void. Instead, an anomaly is a quiet, stubborn question mark etched in stone or metal. It is an object whose sophistication, age, or very existence seems to violate the rules of the timeline we have written for ourselves. These artifacts exist in a challenging intellectual space, often dismissed as hoaxes, misdated, or simply ignored because they complicate a clean story. Our journey through these 30 finds is an exploration of that gray area, a space where curiosity confronts convention, inviting us to ask if the story of humanity is far less linear and infinitely more interesting than we ever dared to believe. These quiet question marks have a name: UPARTs, or out-of-place artifacts. The term itself feels almost playful, yet it describes objects that generate profound unease within the historical community. An UPART is any item discovered in a context that makes its existence seem impossible. It could be a finely machined metal sphere embedded in rock millions of years old, or a detailed world map carved centuries before the continent it depicts was officially known to the culture that made it. These are not merely old things, they are wrong things according to the established timeline. They represent a technology, a material, or a piece of knowledge that should not be there. The immediate reaction to such a find is rarely celebration, but rather a rigorous, often skeptical, process of interrogation. Every possible conventional explanation is exhausted first. Could it be a hoax, perhaps planted to deceive? Might the dating methods be flawed, placing the object in a much older layer by accident? Is it simply a case of modern misinterpretation, where we are projecting our own understanding onto an ancient item that served a completely different, perhaps ceremonial, purpose? These are vital and healthy questions, the bedrock of good science, yet sometimes, after all the tests and debates, an artifact remains stubbornly out of place. Its alloy composition is unique, its craftsmanship precise in a way that predates the known invention of the necessary tools, or its depiction of celestial bodies is accurate beyond the era's presumed astronomical knowledge. This is the moment of true fascination, when an object transitions from a curious oddity to a genuine historical anomaly. It captivates because it represents a crack in the wall of our understanding. For professional researchers, it is a frustrating but irresistible puzzle, a call to re-examine assumptions. For enthusiasts, it is a thrilling hint that the past holds secrets grander and more complex than any textbook dared to suggest. The following discoveries are the very definition of this category. each one a standalone mystery that invites us to look at history not as a settled fact, but as an ongoing story, still being written with every shovel of earth turned. The first of these profound question marks was pulled from the deep blue waters of the Aegean Sea, a place synonymous with ancient myths and sunken treasures. In the year 1901, sponge divers exploring a Roman-era shipwreck near the island of Antikythera made a routine recovery of statues and pottery. But among these expected artifacts was a lump of corroded bronze about the size of a large book, encrusted with centuries of marine growth. It seemed unremarkable, just another piece of scrap metal from a 2,000-year-old tragedy. For decades, it sat in a museum storage room in Athens, its true nature hidden beneath the corrosion. Then, painstaking cleaning and later advanced imaging techniques like X-ray tomography began to reveal the truth. This was not a scrap, it was a machine of breathtaking complexity, now known as the Antikythera Mechanism. Inside that calcified shell, researchers found a precise clockwork of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, some with teeth cut so finely they resemble the work of an 18th-century Swiss watchmaker. Yet this device was crafted around 100 years before the Common Era. Inscriptions on its casing served as a user manual explaining its functions. This was in essence an ancient analog computer designed to model the cosmos. By turning a hand crank, an operator could calculate the positions of the sun and moon, predict lunar and solar eclipses, and even track the cycles of known planets. It accounted for the irregular orbit of the moon with a sophisticated differential gear, a technology historians were certain did not appear until the 16th century. The mechanism was a portable planetarium, an astronomical calculator, and a calendrical device of staggering ambition. The historical impact of this single object cannot be overstated. For a long time, the narrative of ancient Greek science was one of brilliant theory but limited practical application, a world of philosophers contemplating the heavens but not building machines to map them. The Antikythera Mechanism shatters that assumption completely. It proves that a lineage of master craftsmen and mathematicians existed, capable of translating abstract astronomical knowledge into a precise physical model. This was not merely advanced, it was anachronistic. Its sophistication implies a prior period of development, a lost history of mechanical science that flourished and then vanished when the ship carrying it sank. The knowledge required to build it seems to have disappeared for over 1,000 years, with comparable mechanical complexity only re-emerging in Europe during the Renaissance. So this corroded bronze box does more than predict eclipses. It challenges the very idea of a linear, uninterrupted progression of technology. It asks us a haunting question. What other heights of understanding did the ancient world reach, only for that wisdom to be swallowed not by the sea, but by the passage of time itself? While the Antikythera Mechanism reveals a forgotten zenith of mechanical genius, another artifact suggests a different kind of ancient spark, one quite literally electrical. In the 1930s, during excavations at a site near Baghdad, workers uncovered a collection of seemingly mundane objects. There was a simple clay jar, roughly the size of a man's fist, sealed with an asphalt stopper. Inside, they found a rolled copper sheet forming a cylinder, and within that, an iron rod. To an untrained eye, it could have been a storage vessel for scrolls or herbs, a curious but unremarkable find from the Parthian or Sasanian periods, dating somewhere between 250 years before the Common Era and 650 years after. But when archaeologists examined the assembly more closely, a startling hypothesis emerged. If this jar were filled with an acidic electrolyte, something as common as vinegar or fermented grape juice, the setup would create a chemical reaction between the two different metals. The iron rod and copper cylinder, separated by the asphalt seal, would function as electrodes. In essence, this humble clay pot could become a primitive galvanic cell, capable of producing a small but measurable electric current. Replicas built based on the design have confirmed this is not just theory. The Baghdad Battery, as it came to be known, actually works. The immediate and profound question is, of course, what was it for? The voltage produced is low, perhaps 1 or 2 volts, not enough to power any device as we understand it. One compelling theory suggests it could have been used for electroplating, the process of depositing a thin layer of one metal, like gold, onto the surface of another. Artisans of the time were masters of gilding, and a small electrical charge could have provided a novel method for adhering precious metals to statues or jewelry. Other scholars propose it had a ceremonial or medicinal purpose, perhaps creating a mild, tingling sensation that could be interpreted as a spiritual force or used in early therapeutic practices. The debate about its specific use continues, and it is entirely possible we have misunderstood its function altogether. Yet the revolutionary implication remains untouched by this debate. The very existence of such an object demonstrates that the fundamental principle of a battery, the conversion of chemical energy into electrical energy, was not discovered by Alessandro Volta in 1800, as our standard histories claim. It was being tinkered with, perhaps in a workshop in ancient Mesopotamia, over 1,000 years earlier. This does not mean the streets of Baghdad were lit by electric lamps, but it does suggest a lineage of practical experimentation with natural forces that our textbooks have completely overlooked. It represents a spark of empirical knowledge, a hands-on understanding of a phenomenon that would not be formally codified for centuries. Like a single, faint wire leading from a dark room, the Baghdad Battery hints at a whole circuit of lost inquiry, a path of investigation into the hidden energies of the world that was abandoned, forgotten, and only accidentally rediscovered millennia later. From the tangible spark of a battery, we move to a mystery made of ink and vellum, a book that holds its secrets in plain sight. The Voynich Manuscript is not a machine, but a text, and its utter illegibility is what makes it one of history's most enduring puzzles. Discovered in Italy in the early 20th century, this illustrated codex is carbon dated to the early 15th century, placing it firmly in the medieval world. Its physical form is familiar, a book of over 200 pages, beautifully handcrafted. But opening it reveals a universe of the strange. The pages are filled from edge to edge with an unknown script, flowing in a graceful, cursive hand that has never been seen anywhere else. This text is not a simple cipher of a known language. It is a complete linguistic system with its own unique alphabet and structure, one that has resisted over a century of intense effort by the world's top codebreakers, including those who cracked enemy codes during major global conflicts. Accompanying the text are illustrations that are equally perplexing. There are pages of bizarre, unidentifiable plants with bulbous roots and twisting leaves, unlike any known botanical species. There are intricate astronomical charts featuring unfamiliar constellations and celestial diagrams. Perhaps most famously, there are sections showing nude female figures, often depicted bathing or interacting with a complex network of interconnected tubes and vessels that resemble an abstract biological plumbing system. The immediate and persistent question is simple: what is this book? The theories are as varied as they are passionate. Some argue it is an elaborate, centuries-old hoax, a meaningless creation designed to fool a wealthy patron. Yet the statistical properties of the script show patterns consistent with a real language, not random gibberish, and the cost and effort to produce such a detailed vellum book in the 15th century would have been enormous for a mere prank. Others believe it is a treatise on forgotten herbal or alchemical knowledge, written in a coded language to protect secret practices from the uninitiated. The botanical and biological sections could support this, suggesting a study of natural philosophy far outside the mainstream texts of the era. A more recent hypothesis proposes it could be a documentation of a now extinct language from a remote culture, transcribed by a European traveler. The manuscript's resistance to all decoding efforts does more than frustrate researchers. It actively challenges our assumptions about medieval European scholarship. We often view this period through a narrow lens of approved religious and philosophical texts, but the Voynich Manuscript suggests the existence of entire streams of esoteric investigation, of private studies into the natural world that operated parallel to, and perhaps hidden from, official institutions. It represents a literal book of secrets, a silent witness to a way of thinking, observing, and recording that we have completely lost the key to understand. Its very pages are a testament to the fact that the past did not write down everything it knew, and that some knowledge, once carefully guarded, may have slipped through the cracks of history forever, leaving behind only a beautiful, maddening, and utterly silent artifact. From the silent, encrypted pages of a book, we turn to an object that speaks a different kind of mystery, one carved from wood and shaped by the wind. In 1898, during an excavation of a tomb in Saqqara, Egypt, archaeologists uncovered a small artifact that seemed, at first glance, entirely ordinary. It was a simple wooden bird carved from sycamore wood, dated to roughly 200 years before the Common Era. It was catalogued and stored away, just another ceremonial offering or perhaps a child's toy from the Ptolemaic period. For decades, it remained a footnote, a charming but unremarkable piece of ancient craftsmanship. But in the 1970s, a doctor and aviation enthusiast named Kolul Messiha took a closer look at the object, now known as the Saqqara Bird. What he saw did not look like any bird he knew. The proportions were off. Most strikingly, the artifact featured a distinct, straight, vertical tail fin. This is not a feature found in nature. Birds have horizontal tail feathers for stabilization, not vertical rudders. This design element, Messiha argued, was aerodynamic. It was a component meant for flight control, something essential for a gliding craft, not a flapping bird. Intrigued, he and others built scaled-up, weighted models of the artifact, fitted with a horizontal stabilizer that the original may have lost. When launched, these models demonstrated a surprising ability to glide smoothly through the air for considerable distances. The design, it seemed, was inherently stable. This simple wooden object suddenly posed a profound and tantalizing question. Was it merely a stylized bird, or could it be a model of something else entirely? The official explanation remains that it is a ritual object, possibly a votive offering shaped like a falcon, the bird of the god Horus. Yet the vertical tail fin is a persistent anomaly that the bird hypothesis struggles to explain. Could it be that an ancient artisan, through keen observation of birds in flight or even of seeds like the maple key spinning through the air, intuitively understood principles of lift and stability? Might they have translated that observation into a toy, or even a ceremonial model representing the concept of flight? The idea of ancient Egyptians experimenting with basic glider concepts is, by the standard narrative, unthinkable. Their known technological triumphs are rooted in stone, earth, and water, not air, but the Saqqara Bird does not demand we believe in full-scale ancient aircraft. Instead, it invites us to consider a more subtle possibility, that the line between symbolic art and empirical observation was far blurrier than we assume. An artist carving a bird to honor a god might also be a craftsman noting how a certain wing shape catches the air. A toy for a child might also be a physical test of a basic aerodynamic principle, a hands-on experiment in miniature. This artifact suggests that the seeds of complex ideas can be planted in the simplest of forms, encoded not in text, but in shape and function. It is a quiet, wooden whisper that perhaps some ancient minds were looking to the skies not just for divination, but for inspiration, understanding that the secrets of flight were written on the wind, waiting for anyone sharp-eyed enough to read them. The quiet ingenuity of a wooden glider model invites us to wonder what else might have taken flight in the ancient mind. But another discovery forces a far more jarring question, one that challenges not just cultural history, but the very bedrock of geological time. In 1936, on a walk near London, Texas, a curious sight stopped a local couple in their tracks. Protruding from a large, solid lump of stone was what appeared to be the handle of a hammer. They broke the stone open to reveal the object in full, a tool with a 6-inch wooden handle and a 4-inch iron head, seemingly ordinary in every way except for one impossible detail. The stone that had completely encased it was not ordinary rubble. It was a hard, mineralized concretion that geological analysis later suggested formed during the Cretaceous period. This era, often called the Age of Dinosaurs, ended roughly 66 million years ago. The implications are staggering. If the rock formation is truly that ancient, then the hammer entombed within it must be at least as old. This would place a clearly human-made object with its recognizable wooden grip and forged metal head in a world dominated by creatures like Tyrannosaurus rex. The so-called London hammer has become a legendary symbol of the ultimate chronological anomaly. The mainstream scientific explanation is one of natural processes. Geologists propose that the hammer is a more recent artifact, perhaps from the 19th century, that fell into a mineral-rich creek or was left in a crevice. Over time, dissolved minerals in the water could have precipitated around it, cementing it into a hard, rock-like nodule that only appears to be ancient stone. This process, known as concretion, can create deceptive formations that look much older than they are. It is a logical and well-documented phenomenon. Yet, for those who study the hammer, certain questions linger. The wooden handle, which should have rotted away in a matter of centuries if exposed, is partially fossilized, its cellular structure replaced by minerals. The iron of the head is also of an unusual composition, reportedly lacking the sulfur impurities common in modern industrial steel and showing a very low rate of corrosion. These traits suggest a long period of mineralization consistent with great age. The debate around the London hammer is not merely about one strange tool. It is a direct confrontation between two different ways of interpreting evidence. On one side is the established geological timeline, a framework built upon layer of fossil and stratigraphic evidence that places human tool-making in only the most recent sliver of Earth's history. An object like this hammer is within that framework an impossibility, so it must be explained by a more recent, localized event like concretion. On the other side is the raw physicality of the artifact itself, with its peculiar material properties that seem to whisper of immense antiquity. It represents the ultimate outlier, a data point so far from the norm that it forces a difficult choice. Do we dismiss it as a fascinating trick of nature, an exception that proves the rule of our established timelines, or do we allow it to stand as a quiet, persistent challenge, a reminder that our understanding of deep time is still a work in progress? The hammer does not demand we believe in Cretaceous-era blacksmiths, but it does insist we remain humble. It asks us to acknowledge that the story written in stone may have pages we have not yet learned to read, and that some artifacts refuse to fit neatly into any chapter we have so far written for ourselves. The profound mystery of an object out of time leads us to another that questions our place in the cosmos. Deep within the remote Bayan Ha Mountains of China, a story emerged that would become a cornerstone of alternative history. In 1938, an archaeological expedition led by Kai Pu-te reportedly discovered a series of caves containing neat rows of graves holding unusually small skeletons. Scattered among them were hundreds of peculiar stone discs, each about 9 inches in diameter with a perfect hole in the center. Their most striking feature was a thin groove spiraling from the edge to the center, a groove that upon closer inspection was said to contain a series of tiny hieroglyphic-like markings. The initial interpretation was that these were simple ritual objects, perhaps ancient versions of prayer wheels. The story, however, took a dramatic turn years later when a researcher claimed to have translated the microscopic script. According to this highly controversial account, the inscriptions told a startling narrative. They were the recorded history of a people called the Dropa, beings who had crash-landed on Earth from a distant star thousands of years ago, unable to repair their craft and stranded in this unfamiliar world. The discs, the translation suggested, were their chronicle, a plea for understanding carved in stone. The tale was electrifying, suggesting not only contact with extraterrestrial visitors, but their integration into the very fabric of ancient human history. It fused archaeology with what would later be called ancient astronaut theory, proposing that some of humanity's leaps in knowledge or culture might be attributed to outside intervention. The allure of this narrative is powerful, offering a singular, dramatic explanation for the unknown. Yet the Dropa Stones exist almost entirely within the realm of lore. The original discs have never been made available for independent, verifiable study by the broader scientific community. The small skeletons described could plausibly be the remains of individuals from ancient isolated tribes, whose burial practices and physical stature were misinterpreted or exaggerated through retelling. Most mainstream archaeologists dismiss the entire episode as a hoax, a fabrication that grew through sensational retellings in popular media. But to simply label it a hoax and move on misses the deeper reason the story persists with such tenacity. The Dropa Stones, whether real artifacts or modern myth, represent a profound human impulse. They are a cultural artifact in themselves, reflecting our deep desire to find connection and meaning in the distant past, especially when faced with gaps in the historical record. When conventional explanations feel insufficient for a strange object or an unexplained sight, the human imagination naturally reaches for extraordinary possibilities. This story highlights the challenging boundary between rigorous evidence validation and the powerful pull of speculative narrative. It asks us to consider not just what is buried in the earth, but what is embedded in our collective consciousness. Why are we so drawn to tales of ancient visitors? Perhaps it is because they reframe human history as part of a grander, interstellar story, transforming our lonely planet into a crossroads of the cosmos. While the stones themselves may not withstand scholarly scrutiny, their enduring legend forces a valuable question about how we validate history and what we choose to believe when the line between discovery and desire becomes beautifully, tantalizingly blurred. The line between ancient myth and documented reality grows even thinner when we examine a piece of parchment that seems to chart the impossible. In the year 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis compiled a world map on a sheet of gazelle skin. This artifact, discovered in a Turkish palace in 1929, is a stunning work of art and technical skill for its time, accurately depicting the western coast of Africa and the eastern bulge of South America. Yet its true controversy lies farther south, in a landmass that should not be there. The map clearly shows a detailed coastline extending below the Atlantic, a land identified by later researchers as the northern edge of Antarctica. This is profoundly problematic for the standard historical narrative. The continent of Antarctica was not officially sighted by European explorers until 1820, over 300 years after this map was drawn. Even more baffling is the condition of this southern continent as Piri Reis depicted it. His map shows a rugged, fjord-lined coastline, a land free of ice. Modern seismic surveys of the bedrock beneath Antarctica's massive ice sheet have revealed a coastline that matches this depiction with startling accuracy. The last time that coastline was exposed to open air, according to geological evidence, was millions of years ago, in a warm epoch long before the rise of any known human civilization. So how did a 16th century Ottoman admiral possess a chart of a continent hidden under miles of ice for millennia? Piri Reis himself provided a clue in marginal notes on the map. He wrote that he used about 20 source charts and world maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, to compile his work. This admission points scholars toward one of history's greatest repositories of lost knowledge, the legendary Library of Alexandria. It is conceivable that among the countless scrolls housed there were ancient maps, the products of a seafaring culture or cultures whose voyages and discoveries have been completely erased from memory. These source maps could have survived in fragments, copied and recopied over centuries, their origins forgotten but their geographical data preserved, eventually finding their way into Piri Reis's hands. The map does not demand we believe in a single, globe-circling ancient super-civilization. Instead, it suggests a more subtle and perhaps more plausible scenario, a patchwork of accumulated exploration. Different groups over vast stretches of time may have charted different parts of the world. A Phoenician vessel blown off course might have mapped a section of Brazil. A lost Roman expedition could have sailed southern waters and glimpsed an ice-free shore. These disparate charts, stored in great libraries, could have been synthesized by later scholars, creating a composite picture of the world far more complete than any one culture of the time possessed. The Piri Reis Map stands as a ghost image, a palimpsest of forgotten journeys. It implies that human curiosity and capability for exploration have peaks and valleys, that knowledge can be gathered, stored, lost, and then rediscovered in a fragmentary whisper on gazelle skin. It asks us to look at the empty spaces on our historical maps not as voids, but as silent testimony to voyages we never recorded, and to wonders that were once known, then buried not under ice but under the sands of time. The ghostly coastlines on an ancient map hint at lost voyages, but another discovery suggests something even more startling might be physically embedded within the Earth itself. In the early 1960s, a group of rock and gem collectors were searching for interesting specimens in the mountains near Olancha, California. They found a promising geode, a round nodule that often contains beautiful crystal formations inside. Hoping to reveal a glittering cavity, they cut it open with a diamond saw. What they found inside was not crystal but machinery. At the heart of the stone was a cylindrical metal object with a ceramic or porcelain collar and a central metal rod, all held within a hexagonal casing. To anyone familiar with 20th century automotive parts, it looked unmistakably like a modern spark plug. The mystery, however, was not the object's identity but its context. The hard, mineralized shell encasing it was not ordinary dirt or mud. It was a thick, solid concretion of clay, pebbles, and fossilized shells. When this material was analyzed, some claimed the dating suggested it could have formed over 500,000 years ago. This single assessment created an intellectual earthquake. If valid, it would mean a precisely manufactured mechanical component existed on a continent where, according to all mainstream science, the most advanced human technology was a carefully shaped stone hand axe. The implications were as vast as they were unsettling, pointing toward possibilities that defy conventional history. The most immediate and widely accepted explanation from skeptics is one of natural coincidence. They propose the artifact is exactly what it appears to be, a spark plug from a 1920s-era internal combustion engine, likely from a vehicle or piece of mining equipment. In this scenario, the plug was lost or discarded on the ground. Over the decades, mineral-rich water percolated around it, gradually depositing layers of hard calcite and other materials. This process, known as concretion, can create a convincing stone shell around a modern object in a relatively short geological time frame, perhaps a few decades or centuries, not millennia. This would make the Coso Artifact a fascinating example of how nature can mimic antiquity, not a genuine anomaly. Yet, for those who studied the object closely, questions remained that kept the mystery alive. The specific design of the plug did not perfectly match any known champion or other brand spark plug from the era. Furthermore, the material encasing it was reported to be exceptionally hard and thick, and the object itself showed signs of a type of corrosion or fossilization that some argued suggested a much longer period of interment. These unresolved details provided just enough ambiguity to fuel alternative narratives. Could it be evidence of a forgotten, technologically advanced culture in prehistoric America, a civilization that left no other trace? Or does it hint at the speculative idea of time travel, a modern object somehow displaced into the distant past and subsequently fossilized? Perhaps, some wondered, it indicates a flaw in our understanding of how quickly geological concretions can form under certain rare conditions. The true power of the Coso Artifact lies not in proving any one of these extraordinary theories, but in its perfect embodiment of a philosophical dilemma. It is an ordinary object in an extraordinary setting, a stark collision between two incompatible timelines. It forces us to confront how we interpret evidence that contradicts our foundational frameworks. Do we dismiss it because its existence within the accepted timeline is impossible, or do we allow it to challenge the timeline itself? This small, enigmatic object, now reportedly lost, continues to spark debate because it represents the ultimate outsider. It asks us to consider whether the deep past might hold not just primitive tools, but silent, buried echoes of complexity that we have yet to understand or even to look for. A canvas of mystery exists not in a museum, but across an entire desert floor. Shifting from the intimate scale of a single spark plug, we encounter an artifact so vast it can only be comprehended from the sky. The Nazca Lines of southern Peru are a breathtaking paradox, a monumental artwork created for an audience its makers could never physically join. Etched into the dark, stony surface of the arid plateau between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, these geoglyphs consist of hundreds of figures. Some are perfectly straight lines running for miles, cutting across the landscape with ruler-like precision. Others form immense geometric shapes, trapezoids and triangles that stretch across the valleys. The most famous, however, are the biomorphs, enormous depictions of animals and plants. A hummingbird with a wingspan wider than a football field, a spider with perfectly proportioned legs, a monkey with a spiraling tail, all drawn in single, continuous lines on a scale that defies ground-level understanding. From the desert floor, these designs are largely invisible, just shallow trenches scraped into the reddish-brown crust to reveal the lighter soil beneath. Their true form, their breathtaking artistry and exact proportions, only reveals itself from several hundred feet in the air. This is the central, mesmerizing puzzle of Nazca. A culture with no known technology for flight, no balloons or gliders documented in their archaeology, created art that demands an aerial perspective to be seen in its entirety. How did they achieve such scale and precision? The mainstream archaeological view offers a compelling and human-centric explanation. Researchers point to the remarkable surveying techniques the Nazca people could have employed. Using simple stakes and ropes, teams of workers could have transferred a small-scale design to the desert floor through a coordinate system, enlarging it step by step. The dry, windless climate of the plateau has preserved these lines for centuries, suggesting the work, while monumental, was within the realm of organized communal effort. The purpose is widely interpreted as ritualistic and religious, likely connected to water and fertility deities in an extremely arid environment. The lines may have been sacred pathways walked during ceremonies, their forms representing constellations or spiritual animals meant to be seen by the gods in the sky above, not by humans on the ground. This explanation anchors the lines firmly within the known cultural and technological framework of the Nazca. Yet, the sheer ambition of the project continues to inspire wonder and alternative questions. The precision of some lines, which run arrows straight over miles of uneven terrain, suggests a sophisticated understanding of geometry and alignment that rivals modern engineering. The persistence of the shapes, maintained without an overseeing viewpoint, speaks to a staggering level of communal planning and execution. For some, this level of achievement prompts more speculative ideas, including the controversial notion that the Nazca might have developed primitive methods of aerial observation, such as tethered balloons or large kites, leaving no archaeological trace. Others look to the alignment of certain lines with celestial events or underground water sources, suggesting they functioned as a giant astronomical calendar or a map of precious resources. Whether one accepts the established ritual explanation or entertains more speculative theories, the Nazca Lines undeniably challenge our perception of ancient engineering and artistic purpose. They represent a different kind of communication, a language written not on parchment but on the skin of the earth itself. They force us to consider that monumental art might not always be created for human appreciation in the traditional sense, but could serve as a bridge between the community and the cosmos, a permanent offering etched into the landscape, waiting for a viewpoint only the heavens could provide. This desert canvas asks us to expand our definition of both art and engineering, to see in these ancient lines not just patterns, but a profound statement of human aspiration, a desire to make a mark so grand it could only be fully understood from the perspective of the gods. The vast desert canvas of Nazca speaks a language of lines and symbols, but in the dense jungles of Central America, a different culture chose to express its mystery in a far more tactile and enduring form. Scattered across the Diquís Delta of Costa Rica, and often partially reclaimed by the forest, lie hundreds of stone spheres of astonishing precision. Ranging from the size of a bowling ball to colossal orbs over 2 meters in diameter and weighing many tons, these granite balls are known locally as Los Bolas. Crafted by a pre-Columbian culture between 300 and 1500 years after the Common Era, their existence presents a quiet, physical puzzle. Their near-perfect sphericity is the first startling fact. In a society that did not use metal tools or the wheel, artisans shaped these immense stones using only harder stones, sand, and water, pecking and grinding them into forms of geometric idealism. The consistency is breathtaking, with hundreds of spheres found across the region displaying a uniformity that would be challenging to achieve even with modern machine lathes. How did they manage such precision without advanced measuring devices? One compelling theory suggests they may have used a simple but effective technique involving counterweights and rotation, slowly working the stone into a balanced form by identifying and grinding down high spots. The true enigma, however, deepens when we ask not just how, but why. Their purpose remains completely unknown, lost with the people who made them. Some spheres were found arranged in alignments, leading to speculation they served as astronomical markers, perhaps pointing to solstice sunrises or significant stars. Others were located near important structures or burial sites, suggesting they functioned as symbols of power, authority, or social status for chieftains. They might have been territorial markers denoting clan lands, or perhaps they held a sacred, ritual significance connected to the cosmos or deities. The absence of any written record from the culture that created them turns each sphere into a silent monolith, an answer waiting for a question we have forgotten to ask. Beyond the mystery of their purpose, these spheres deliver a profound challenge to our assumptions about pre-industrial societies. We often unconsciously equate technological advancement with metal and mechanics, but the Diquís Spheres demonstrate a mastery of material, geometry, and physics achieved entirely through stone, patience, and profound observational skill. Creating a perfect sphere requires an intuitive understanding of balance, symmetry, and three-dimensional space. The fact that this knowledge was applied consistently, on a massive scale across centuries, suggests a sophisticated tradition of craftsmanship and engineering philosophy that was passed down through generations. These are not crude idols, they are demonstrations of mathematical principle made solid. They ask us to expand our definition of technology beyond tools and machines, to include the refined knowledge of form, material, and process. In their silent, perfect roundness, they represent a different kind of intelligence, one that sought not to conquer nature with metal, but to reveal ideal forms hidden within the stone itself, leaving behind a legacy not of texts or temples, but of perfect geometry enduring in the jungle shade. The silent perfection of the Diquís Spheres speaks to a mastery of form, but another set of stones from South America tells a far more chaotic and controversial story. In the 1960s, a Peruvian farmer named Javier Cabrera began amassing a collection of carved andesite stones from the Ica region, claiming local farmers found them in ancient tombs. The stones themselves are river rocks darkened by age, but their surfaces are etched with intricate line drawings that depict scenes so bizarre they seem ripped from science fiction. One moment you see a human figure riding on the back of a triceratops, as casually as a man on a horse. The next, you find a detailed illustration of what looks like a heart transplant surgery, with a patient on a table and a physician holding a scalpel. Others show complex star charts, maps of unknown continents, and advanced machinery that resembles telescopes or flying vehicles. The implications are, to put it mildly, earth-shattering. If authentic, these carvings suggest that an ancient culture in Peru possessed knowledge of creatures that went extinct 65 million years ago, understood medical procedures centuries ahead of their time, and mapped the heavens with impossible precision. The immediate and overwhelming response from the archaeological establishment was one of profound skepticism. The stones appeared suddenly, with no documented provenance from a controlled excavation. The style of the carvings was crisp and fresh, lacking the patina one would expect in genuinely ancient engravings. Under pressure, one of the farmers who supplied the stones eventually admitted he and others had carved them themselves, using modern tools and ideas from comic books and magazines, selling them to Cabrera as genuine antiquities. For most scholars, this confession closed the case. The Ica stones were a modern hoax, a lucrative cottage industry that preyed on the desire for sensational history. Yet for Dr. Cabrera and a small group of supporters, the story was not so simple. They argued that while many fakes were indeed produced to meet demand, the original, truly ancient stones did exist, sourced from sealed tombs before the hoaxers began their work. They pointed to the sheer volume and thematic consistency of the collection, numbering in the tens of thousands, as evidence of a deeper tradition. They also noted that some stones depict specific dinosaur species, like the Stegosaurus, with anatomical accuracy that was not fully established in popular science until long after the alleged hoax began. This controversy sits at the heart of a critical tension in the study of the past. On one side is the essential, rigorous framework of archaeology, which demands verifiable context, peer-reviewed analysis, and a chain of custody for any artifact. From this perspective, the Ica stones fail every test. They are a cautionary tale about how the hunger for extraordinary evidence can be exploited. On the other side is a powerful public fascination with the idea of forbidden history, a narrative where ancient peoples were custodians of lost wisdom. The stones, whether real or forged, tapped directly into that deep-seated curiosity. They became icons in popular culture, fueling books, documentaries, and endless debates about the possibility that human history is not a slow climb from ignorance, but a cycle of rise, catastrophic fall, and forgotten brilliance. Ultimately, the legacy of the Ica stones may be more cultural than archaeological. They force us to confront a difficult question: where does healthy skepticism end and closed-minded dismissal begin? While the evidence strongly points to a modern creation, The stone's enduring grip on the imagination reveals something fundamental about us. They are a mirror reflecting our own desires to solve the great mysteries of prehistory, to find proof that our ancestors saw wonders we can only dream of. Whether ancient artifact or clever fake, they serve as a permanent reminder that the story of human origins is a battlefield, not just of evidence but of belief, where every carved line is a challenge to the official narrative we hold so dear. A single weathered coin can carry the weight of an entire rewritten chapter. In the soft earth of a Native American shell hidden at the Goddard Archaeological Site in Maine, researchers unearthed a small silver disc that seemed profoundly out of place. It was a Norse penny minted between 1065 and 1080 of the Common Era, over 400 years before Christopher Columbus's famed voyage. On one side, the coin bore the image of a king, on the other, a cross, unmistakably linking it to the Viking world of the North Atlantic. This object, now known as the Maine Penny, is a whisper of contact across an ocean, a tiny metallic clue that the story of the continent's meeting is far more complex than a single Italian explorer's journey in 1492. The immediate and obvious connection is to the only confirmed Norse settlement in North America, Elance Oaks Meadows in Newfoundland. That site proves Vikings built temporary dwellings on the continent's edge around the year 1000. The Maine Penny, however, was found hundreds of miles to the south, far from any known Norse camp. This simple geographical fact opens a cascade of possibilities. How did this coin travel so far from its point of origin? The most conservative explanation is that it moved through extensive indigenous trade networks. A Norse trader at Elance Oaks Meadows might have exchanged it with a local individual. From there, over generations, the coin could have been passed from hand to hand, community to community, traveling down the coast as a curiosity or a valuable piece of material, eventually finding its resting place in Maine. This theory requires no further Viking voyages, relying instead on the well-documented and sophisticated trade routes that connected native peoples across the continent. Yet the coin's lonely presence invites a more daring question. Could it be direct evidence of a Viking exploration party that ventured farther south along the North American coastline? The sagas speak of lands like Vinland, rich with grapes and timber, whose exact location remains debated. While Elance Oaks Meadows is a proven site, it may have been just a base camp for wider exploration. A single lost coin is not proof of a settlement, but it could be a fleeting trace of a ship that sailed past, perhaps trading with or encountering coastal communities. It represents a possibility, not a proven fact, but in the world of historical anomalies, possibility is everything. The Maine Penny's true power lies not in proving a massive Norse colonization of New England, but in challenging a monolithic narrative. For centuries, the story of the discovery of America was centered on Columbus, a clean break that divided Old World and New. This coin, resting among clamshells and stone tools, complicates that story beautifully. It suggests a pre-Columbian world that was not a collection of isolated continents, but a place of sporadic, tenuous, yet real connections. It hints at moments of contact that were likely brief, perhaps even forgotten by the next generation, but which left behind a material echo. This small piece of silver asks us to replace a simple story of discovery with a more nuanced tapestry of occasional meetings, of knowledge and objects flowing along unexpected paths. It reminds us that history is often written not in bold declarations, but in quiet, overlooked finds that force us to listen more carefully to the subtle, interconnected whispers of the past. A single coin whispers of fleeting coastal contact, but a massive stone slab shouts a claim that would shatter the timeline entirely. In 1898, a farmer clearing trees in Kensington, Minnesota, unearthed a 200-pound rectangle of greywacke stone tangled in the roots of an aspen tree. Its surface was carved with a lengthy message in runic characters, a script used by medieval Scandinavians. The inscription told a harrowing tale of a journey and a tragedy. It stated that 8 Goths or Swedes and 22 Norwegians on an exploration voyage from Vinland had made camp here. After returning to their shoreline base one day, they found 10 of their companions slain, red with blood. The message ended with a plea to the Virgin Mary for deliverance and a date, the year 1362. This was the Kensington Runestone, and if its words were true, they would completely upend the narrative of North American exploration. Here was not a trace of a coastal visit, but a dated record of a party of 30 Norse explorers penetrating deep into the continent's interior, to what is now west-central Minnesota, a full 130 years before Columbus set sail. The implications were staggering, suggesting sustained transatlantic travel and inland exploration that history had entirely forgotten. From the moment of its discovery, the stone was engulfed in controversy. The academic world reacted with deep skepticism. Linguists and rhunologists pointed to what they saw as glaring anachronisms in the inscription. They argued the rune forms were a mix from different periods and regions, and that certain words and grammatical constructions were modern, not medieval. The very phraseology, some experts claimed, bore the hallmarks of a 19th century forger's idea of Old Norse, not the authentic voice of a 14th century carver. The prevailing scholarly consensus swiftly branded it an elaborate hoax, likely created by the farmer or a local prankster with some knowledge of runes, perhaps inspired by the growing public fascination with Viking lore. The stone was dismissed as a curiosity, a testament to local myth-making rather than a historical document, yet the stone refused to be silenced so easily. Its defenders, often independent researchers and Scandinavian cultural groups, pointed to physical evidence that seemed to contradict the hoax theory. They noted the immense size and weight of the slab, arguing it would have been a monumental task to carve and then secretly bury it beneath the roots of a tree that was decades, if not centuries, old at the time of discovery. Later geological studies entered the fray, examining the weathering of the carved grooves. Some analyses suggested the weathering was consistent with several centuries of exposure, while others argued it could have been achieved in a much shorter time. This conflicting scientific testimony created a perfect stalemate, a battle of interpretations where each side could marshal evidence to support its view. The Kensington Runestone thus became more than an artifact. It became a symbol of a fundamental divide. It represents the immense difficulty of verifying a solitary, extraordinary find that exists in an evidential vacuum. There is no accompanying Norse settlement, no other rune stones leading a trail west, no corroborating entry in Icelandic sagas. It stands alone, a massive, stubborn question mark hewn from rock. This solitary nature is precisely what makes it so philosophically powerful. Authentic or not, the stone forces us to confront how history is validated and rewritten. Mainstream history is built upon cumulative evidence, a preponderance of data from multiple sources that together construct a reliable narrative. A single outlier, no matter how dramatic, is typically insufficient to overturn that narrative, and for good reason. The field must be guarded against fraud and error. Yet, history is also punctuated by moments where a single discovery, like the Rosetta Stone or the tomb of Tutankhamun, did indeed revolutionize understanding. The Kensington Runestone sits in the agonizing space between these two realities. It asks us to consider what burden of proof we require to accept a paradigm-shifting claim. Must we wait for a second, confirming stone to be found? Or can the weathering patterns and linguistic nuances of this one ever be convincing enough on their own? The debate, which still simmers today, is less about Scandinavian explorers in Minnesota and more about the very nature of historical evidence itself. It is a permanent reminder that some mysteries are carved not just in stone, but in the way we choose to believe, deep within the stone walls of an Egyptian temple, a carved image seems to flicker with an impossible idea. In the crypt of the Hathor Temple at Dendera, a series of intricate reliefs have sparked one of the most visually compelling debates in alternative history. One particular panel shows a strange scene. A large, elongated object, reminiscent of a modern light bulb in its shape, is held aloft by a supporting pillar. Inside this bulbous form rests a snake stretched out in a straight line, its head pointed toward one end. The snake is encased within what appears to be a lotus flower, from which a wire or cable leads to a small box on which a baboon-like god sits. To a modern eye, the resemblance is startling. The bulb shape, the filament-like snake, the supporting pillar that could be an insulator, and the connecting cable all seem to assemble into a recognizable picture, an ancient Egyptian electric light. This interpretation, known as the Dendera Light hypothesis, proposes that the priests of Hathor might have possessed knowledge of some form of electrical illumination, perhaps using primitive batteries like the Baghdad device to power arc lights within the dark, windowless chambers of their temples. The visual argument is undeniably powerful, suggesting a literal reading of the image as a technical diagram. The mainstream Egyptological explanation, however, paints a completely different, deeply symbolic picture. Scholars identify the central object not as a bulb but as a lotus flower, a plant of profound religious significance in Egyptian mythology. The lotus, which closes at night and reopens with the dawn, was a potent symbol of creation, rebirth, and the sun itself. The snake emerging from it is interpreted as a cosmic serpent, a representation of the primal life force. The supporting pillar is a jed pillar, a symbol of stability and the backbone of the god Osiris. The entire scene, according to this view, is a complex mythological tableau. It illustrates the moment of creation where the sun god, born from a lotus, brings light and order to the universe. The baboon is likely the god Hapi, associated with the Nile's inundation, or Thoth, the god of wisdom, further anchoring the image in a web of celestial and natural symbolism. There is no need for electricity in this reading, only a rich language of metaphor carved in stone. This stark contrast in interpretation makes the Dendera relief a perfect case study in how we see the past. It highlights the powerful influence of our own technological lens. Living in a world illuminated by glass bulbs and glowing screens, we naturally gravitate toward seeing a light bulb in the carving. Our perspective is shaped by our tools, and we can unconsciously project those tools onto ancient artisans. The Egyptians, however, lived in a world where the primary source of light was the sun, followed by fire. Their symbolic language was built from the natural world, the cycles of the Nile, and the journey of celestial bodies. For them, describing the concept of divine light and creation through the imagery of a lotus and a serpent was not primitive. It was profoundly sophisticated, connecting the spark of life to the daily miracle of the sunrise. So does the Dendera relief depict an ancient light bulb? The scholarly evidence strongly favors the symbolic interpretation, rooted in decades of contextual study of Egyptian art and religion. Yet, the enduring fascination with the electrical theory speaks to a deeper, more philosophical question. If an ancient culture did stumble upon a principle like rudimentary electrical lighting, how would they have recorded it? They would not have used the technical schematics of an engineer. They would have described it through the only vocabulary they had, the language of myth, symbol, and religion. A terrifying arc of light might be described as a fiery serpent. A glowing glass vessel might be depicted as a radiant flower. The Dendera carving challenges us to consider the possibility that advanced knowledge and mythological expression are not mutually exclusive. It asks us to look at ancient symbols not just as stories, but as potential containers for empirical observations about the natural world, observations that we, separated by millennia and a completely different worldview, might struggle to decode. The true mystery of Dendera may not be whether they had electricity, but whether we have lost the ability to read the full depth of meaning in their sacred stone. The symbols of Dendera ask us to decode a lost language of myth, but a hill in southeastern Turkey presents a mystery built not from symbols but from staggering, undeniable scale. Göbekli Tepe is not merely an archaeological site. It is a profound challenge to the origin story of civilization itself. Carbon dating places its construction around 9,600 years before the Common Era, a date so ancient it defies easy comprehension. To put that in perspective, this complex of stone circles was already ancient when the first stones of Stonehenge were raised, a gap of over 6,000 years. It predates the invention of pottery. It predates the establishment of settled farming. According to the long-established narrative, this should be impossible. The standard story of human progress, often called the Neolithic Revolution, is a clear sequence. First, humans learned to farm, creating a stable food surplus. That surplus allowed people to settle in permanent villages. With settled life came specialization, social hierarchies, and eventually, the spare time and organized labor required to build monumental architecture for religious or political purposes. Göbekli Tepe shatters this logical staircase. Here, on a windswept hill, hunter-gatherers accomplished one of the most ambitious construction projects of the ancient world. They quarried, transported, and erected massive limestone pillars, some weighing over 10 tons, carving them into distinctive T-shapes and adorning them with exquisite reliefs of animals, foxes, scorpions, and birds. These pillars were arranged into a series of circular enclosures, a ritual landscape of breathtaking scale and clear intentionality. The implication is revolutionary. At Göbekli Tepe, it appears that monumental architecture came first. The driving force was not agricultural surplus, but something else, likely a powerful, shared belief system. The need to build and maintain this sacred site would have required a large, coordinated workforce, demanding social organization, leadership, and the pooling of resources from a wide area. This very act of coming together for a common spiritual purpose may have been the catalyst that spurred social complexity. To feed the hundreds of people gathering for rituals or construction seasons, these communities might have begun to cultivate wild grasses nearby, deliberately encouraging their growth. In this view, agriculture was not the cause of civilization, but a consequence of it, a practical solution born from the need to sustain a sacred project. This turns our understanding of the Neolithic Revolution completely upside down. It suggests that what sparked the journey toward cities and kingdoms was not a pragmatic discovery about seeds, but a collective leap of the human spirit, a shared desire to build something monumental that connected them to the cosmos. Göbekli Tepe stands as a silent, stone testament to a different path into the future, one where belief built the first temple, and the temple, in turn, taught humanity how to organize, cooperate, and ultimately, how to reshape the very world around them. The idea that belief might have built our first temples leads us to a place where stone seems to defy the sea itself. Off the southern coast of Japan, near the island of Yonaguni, divers exploring the clear blue depths made a startling discovery. What they found was not a shipwreck or a coral reef, but a massive, singular rock formation rising from the ocean floor. This is the Yonaguni Monument, a structure so geometrically precise it looks like a sunken plaza or a stepped pyramid carved by human hands. Its features are unmistakable: wide, flat terraces that drop like giant stairs, sharp, 90-degree angles where walls meet, and what appear to be straight pillars and even a triangular entrance. From above, the entire formation has a distinct, almost architectural symmetry, a stark contrast to the naturally eroded seabed surrounding it. The immediate and obvious question hangs in the water: is this a natural wonder, or the ruins of a civilization swallowed by the rising oceans? Geologists who have studied the site offer a compelling natural explanation. The monument is composed of sandstone, a rock that naturally fractures along straight lines and flat plains. They argue that the powerful tidal currents in the area, acting over millennia, could have eroded the stone along these existing joints, creating the terraces, platforms, and sharp angles that so resemble human craftsmanship. In this view, Yonaguni is a magnificent example of what is known as a tidal platform, a geological formation shaped entirely by the relentless forces of water and time. The apparent steps and pillars are simply the result of weaker layers of rock being worn away faster than stronger ones, leaving behind a structure that tricks our pattern-seeking minds into seeing design. This explanation anchors the monument firmly within the known processes of coastal geology, requiring no lost cities or unknown builders. Yet, for those who examine the formation closely, certain elements resist a purely natural story. The most striking are the perfectly straight, parallel channels cut into the rock, and the presence of what look like carved circular depressions or drainage holes. Some researchers point to the alignment of the monument's primary faces, which seem to correspond to cardinal directions, a feature more commonly associated with intentional human construction than random erosion. If even a portion of this site was shaped or enhanced by human hands, the implications are profound. The monument now sits under about 80 feet of water. For it to have been built or used as a dry land structure, sea levels would have needed to be dramatically lower. Geological data tells us that last happened at the end of the last ice age, over 10,000 years ago. This time frame places Yonaguni in a prehistoric era that, according to mainstream archaeology, was populated by hunter-gatherer societies using stone tools. The scale and apparent precision of the monument suggest a level of social organization and stone-working capability not attributed to that period in this part of the world. Yonaguni thus becomes more than a diving spot. It becomes a physical focal point for a much larger debate. It represents the tantalizing possibility of a forgotten chapter, a culture that flourished on now submerged coastal plains during an ancient climatic epoch. This idea, often called the drowned civilization hypothesis, suggests that some of humanity's earliest strides toward complex society may have occurred not in the river valleys we know, but on continental shelves that are now underwater, their history erased by rising seas. Whether one sees a masterpiece of natural geology or the ghost of a lost world, Yonaguni challenges us to look at the ocean floor not as a barren end, but as a hidden archive. It asks us to consider how much of our own story might be resting in the silent, blue darkness, waiting for the curious to look past the waves and see the shapes our ancestors may have left behind. The silent stones of Yonaguni rest beneath the sea, but in the arid plains of modern Pakistan, another city holds evidence of a different kind of transformation, one etched in fire. Mohenjo-Daro, one of the great urban centers of the ancient Indus Valley civilization, is a marvel of early city planning with its grid-like streets and sophisticated drainage systems. Yet scattered among its orderly ruins are bricks that tell a more violent story. These bricks are not merely charred or blackened from a common blaze. In specific areas they appear vitrified, their surface fused into a glass-like slag, as if subjected to a heat so intense and sudden that the very silica in the clay melted and then rapidly cooled. This is not the typical result of a house fire or even a widespread conflagration. Vitrification requires temperatures well over 1,000 degrees Celsius, a level of heat associated with industrial processes or catastrophic events. The immediate and logical explanation from mainstream archaeology points to localized, incredibly fierce fires. Perhaps a large store of oil, resin, or other flammable materials caught fire in a warehouse district, creating a temporary inferno hot enough to glaze the surrounding bricks. Alternatively, the bricks themselves might have been part of a pottery or metalworking kiln that experienced a runaway thermal event, essentially overheating and fusing its own structure. These are plausible, grounded scenarios that fit within the known technological and environmental context of the ancient city. They remind us that accidents and disasters are part of the human story, even in meticulously planned communities. Yet, the dramatic appearance of these glassified bricks, combined with the eventual and still debated decline of the Indus Valley cities, has fueled a far more speculative line of inquiry. Some alternative researchers have pointed to ancient Indian texts like the Mahabharata, which contain passages describing weapons of terrifying power. These passages speak of blazing projectiles that could reduce cities to ash, of a single shot that could brighten the sky like 10,000 suns, and of hair and nails falling out among survivors in the aftermath. To those seeking an extraordinary explanation, these poetic descriptions sound hauntingly familiar. They have led to the controversial proposal that the vitrified bricks of Mohenjo-Daro are not evidence of a mundane fire, but the scorched remains of an ancient, perhaps even nuclear catastrophe. This theory suggests that a devastating technological conflict, now lost to legend, could have been a real historical event, its memory preserved in myth and its physical signature left in the melted stones of a ruined city. While the mainstream scientific community overwhelmingly rejects the ancient nuclear hypothesis as lacking any credible evidence, the dialogue it sparks is valuable in a broader sense. It forces us to consider how ancient cultures processed and recorded truly cataclysmic events. Before the language of geology or physics existed, how would a society describe a volcanic eruption, a massive meteor airburst, or a sudden, civilization-ending natural disaster? They would use the vocabulary they had, the language of gods and heroes, of divine wrath and celestial weapons. A plume of ash might become the breath of an angry deity. A sheet of lightning could be described as a spear thrown from the heavens. The vitrified bricks, whether from a terrible accident or a natural phenomenon we have yet to identify, stand as a physical anchor for this process of myth-making. They represent a tangible point where archaeology and legend might, in a less literal way, touch. The true mystery of Mohenjo-Daro's fused bricks may not be about ancient atomic blasts, but about the endurance of memory. They prompt us to ask what real, traumatic events might lie at the heart of our oldest stories, and how the scars left on the landscape can echo for millennia, transformed into epic tales that we are only now learning to decipher through the silent, glassy testimony of stone. A strange metal object lay beside the bones of an ancient giant. In 1974, construction workers digging a trench along the Mureș River in Romania uncovered something unexpected. About 30 feet down, they found two large fossilized bones, later identified as belonging to a mastodon, a prehistoric elephant-like creature that vanished over 10,000 years ago. Nestled beside these ancient remains was a heavy, wedge-shaped piece of metal. It was sent for analysis, and the results sent a shock through the small circle of researchers who saw them. The object, now called the Aiud Wedge, was composed of an alloy primarily of aluminum coated in a thick layer of oxide. This in itself was not extraordinary. Aluminum is a common modern metal. The extraordinary part was the context. Industrial aluminum, as we know it, is a product of the 19th century. The metal does occur naturally, but extracting it in a pure, usable form requires a complex industrial process called electrolysis, which was not invented until 1886. How, then, did a refined aluminum alloy end up buried in a layer of earth alongside the remains of an animal from the last ice age? Dating the object directly is difficult, but the geological stratum where it was found suggests an age of around 11,000 years. This single piece of metal poses a stark, binary puzzle. On one hand, it could be exactly what it appears to be, a piece of advanced metallurgy from a time when human societies were, according to all mainstream history, using stone tools. This would imply a lost chapter of technological development, a culture that mastered a process we believe was discovered only 2 centuries ago. The implications would be staggering, forcing a complete re-evaluation of prehistoric innovation. The more conventional explanation offered by skeptics is one of simple contamination. They propose the wedge is a fragment of modern machinery, perhaps a tooth from a digging bucket or a piece of heavy industrial equipment from the 19th or 20th century. In this scenario, the object fell or was discarded during earlier, unrecorded work at the site. Over time, it settled down through the soil, perhaps aided by water or animal activity, until it came to rest next to the much older mastodon bone. This process, where a newer object is found in an older archaeological layer, is a known challenge in the field called stratigraphic displacement. It is a logical and common-sense resolution that protects the established timeline of human technological progress. Yet, for those who have studied the Aiud Wedge, a few details resist this tidy answer. The layer of oxide coating the metal is remarkably thick, suggesting it had been buried for a very long time, not just a few decades. The alloy composition itself is also unusual, containing other metals in specific proportions. While it is undoubtedly aluminum-based, its exact makeup does not match any standard modern industrial alloy perfectly, leaving a sliver of ambiguity. This artifact, more than almost any other, represents the purest form of a historical anomaly. It is not a mysterious carving or a puzzling structure open to symbolic interpretation. It is a piece of hard, tested material science sitting in the wrong geological era. It forces a direct confrontation between 2 mutually exclusive stories. One story protects the known narrative of human advancement by attributing the find to a mistake, a trick of geology where the present intruded upon the past. The other story dares to suggest that the narrative itself is incomplete, that peaks of knowledge can rise and fall into utter obscurity, leaving behind only a single, inexplicable artifact as a clue. The Aiud Wedge does not ask for belief in ancient astronauts or cataclysmic wars. It simply sits heavy and silent, asking us, which is harder to accept, a profound error in our understanding of stratigraphy or a profound gap in our understanding of human potential. Buried in the soil of a New Hampshire farm, a single stone egg holds a universe of questions. In 1872, workers digging a post hole near Lake Winnipesaukee struck something hard and smooth. What they pulled from the earth was no ordinary rock, but an object of deliberate and exquisite craftsmanship, now known as the Lake Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone. It is roughly the size and shape of a large goose egg carved from a dense, dark quartzite, but its surface is anything but simple. Intricate symbols cover it, a miniature gallery of puzzling images. On one side, the carved face of a person peers out. Nearby, there is a teepee, an ear of corn, a spiral, and other geometric patterns including circles and arrows. The precision is remarkable, with holes drilled cleanly through both ends of the egg, each bore perfectly cylindrical and smooth. This was not a casual doodle on a river stone. It was a purposefully created artifact, an object that clearly meant something to someone. Yet from the moment of its discovery, it has been an orphan in history, a beautiful item with no clear lineage. The imagery provides clues, but they lead in conflicting directions. The teepee and corn suggest a connection to indigenous cultures of North America. However, the specific style of the carvings, the facial features, and the combination of symbols do not match any known artistic tradition from the local Abenaki people or any other northeastern tribes from the pre-colonial or early colonial period. It feels familiar yet strangely foreign. Other theories have tried to claim it. Some have suggested it is a Celtic artifact brought by transatlantic travelers in antiquity. Others see it as a unique creation from an early European settler with both stone-working skill and an interest in native motifs. There is even speculation it could be a Victorian-era hoax or a practice piece from a talented but undocumented artisan. The stone itself refuses to give up its secrets. Its material offers no geographic fingerprint, and its symbols are a language we have lost the key to translate. This is why the mystery stone is so profoundly important, not for what it explains, but for what it represents. It is the archetype of the small, lonely enigma. For every massive pyramid or sunken city that captures headlines, there are thousands of objects like this, sitting quietly in museum storage drawers or private collections. They are the beautiful oddities, the items that do not fit any known typology or timeline. They whisper of individual lives, of a single craftsperson expressing a belief or telling a story in a way that was perhaps unique to their community, a community that may have left no other trace. They hint at lost trades, at artistic experiments that never became a tradition, or at cultural exchanges so brief they are recorded only in a single carved stone. The Lake Winnipesaukee egg does not demand we rewrite history with a grand narrative. Instead, it asks us to embrace a quieter, more humbling truth. The archaeological record is not a complete library. It is a fragmentary collection of pages, most of which have been lost to time. This stone is one such page, beautifully illuminated but written in a dialect we may never fully understand. It reminds us that the past is populated not just by empires and monuments, but by countless anonymous individuals whose creativity and beliefs are now reduced to a single, polished question, waiting in the dark for someone to wonder what story it was meant to tell. While a single carved stone can represent a lost personal story, a set of inscribed clay tablets might hold the key to an entire lost language. In 1961, at a Neolithic archaeological site in Romania known as Tărtăria, researchers uncovered 3 small, fired clay tablets. They were unassuming in size, but their surfaces were incised with a series of symbols, arranged in rows and grouped in a way that felt deliberate, almost systematic. These markings, now known as the Tărtăria Tablets, ignited a firestorm that still smolders in the world of archaeology. Radiocarbon dating of associated materials placed these objects around 5,300 years before the Common Era. This date is not just old, it is revolutionary. It predates the earliest known Sumerian cuneiform tablets from Mesopotamia by over 1,000 years. If the symbols on these small discs constitute a true writing system, then the story of literacy, one of humanity's most defining intellectual leaps, did not begin in the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East as we have long believed. It may have begun in the forests and river valleys of Neolithic Southeast Europe, completely rewriting the origin story of recorded thought. The symbols themselves are the core of the mystery. They are not pictures of objects but abstract shapes, lines, and what appear to be stylized figures. Some look like a branching tree, others like a circle with a cross inside, or a series of angled lines. To those who argue for their status as writing, these are not random scratches. They are arranged in a linear order, grouped into what could be words or phrases, and they show repetition of certain signs, a key characteristic of a codified script. The implication is staggering. It suggests that a society living over 7,000 years ago, one we typically classify as a simple farming culture, had developed a need to record information in a symbolic, permanent form that could be read by others. This would imply a level of administrative complexity, trade, or spiritual tradition that demanded something beyond oral history or simple tally marks. Mainstream scholarship, however, approaches these tablets with profound caution. The prevailing view is one of healthy skepticism. Many experts classify the markings not as writing, but as proto-writing, or even as ritual symbols with a purely ceremonial or ownership-related function. They could be potter's marks, clan symbols, or sacred signs used in religious ceremonies, meant to be recognized and understood in a specific, localized context rather than to convey complex language. The fact that only 3 such tablets have ever been found, and from a single site, is a major point against them representing a widespread, functioning writing system. A true script, archaeologists argue, leaves a trail, appearing on various media across a cultural area, not in one isolated cache. This debate is far more than an academic squabble over definitions. It is a fundamental clash over how we recognize the birth of complex ideas. What is the line between a symbol and a letter, between a sacred sigil and a word? The Tărtăria Tablets sit right on that blurry frontier. If they are merely ritual objects, they are fascinating relics of Neolithic belief. But if they are indeed the fragments of a true script, they are seismic. They would mean that the human drive to fix language into permanent form emerged independently in multiple places, and much earlier than our history books allow. It would suggest that the spark of literacy, the very engine of cumulative knowledge, flickered to life in the dim light of a European dwelling long before the great city-states of Sumer were even conceived. These small, fired clay discs, then, are not just artifacts. They are a direct challenge to our map of intellectual dawn, asking us if the light of writing first broke not in the east, but in a place we have only just begun to listen to. The quiet symbols of the Tărtăria Tablets hint at a language we cannot hear, but from the same ancient soil emerge figures that speak a visual language we struggle to understand. Among the earliest settled communities of Mesopotamia, the Ubaid culture laid the foundations for all that would follow: the first cities, the first temples, the first complex societies. Yet within the artifacts of this foundational period, we find a collection of terracotta figurines that stand apart from everything that came after them. These are the Ubaid Lizardmen, and they are unlike any other depiction of humanity from the ancient world. Crafted between 5,500 and 4,000 years before the Common Era, these statues portray humanoid bodies with distinctly reptilian features. Their heads are elongated with slitted eyes and what appears to be a scaled texture. Some have a pronounced crest or ridge along the skull. Their postures are human, often sitting or standing, and in many of the most striking examples, they are depicted holding infants or in a pose of nursing a child. The craftsmanship is deliberate. The reptilian characteristics are not a stylistic accident but a core part of their identity. This presents a profound puzzle. Why would a culture at the very dawn of civilization choose to represent human figures engaged in the most human of acts like childcare with the features of a lizard? The mainstream archaeological interpretation leans heavily into the realm of ritual and symbolism. One leading theory suggests these figurines represent shamans or priests wearing ceremonial masks and costumes. In this view, the lizard features are not literal but symbolic of a spiritual transformation. The shaman, in performing rituals, might have been believed to take on the attributes of an animal spirit, perhaps one associated with water, fertility, or the underworld, realms often connected to reptiles in later mythologies. The act of holding or nursing an infant could then symbolize a ritual of blessing, initiation, or a plea for fertility for the community. Another theory posits they are depictions of deities, very early conceptions of gods who were hybrid beings, blending human form with animal power to represent forces of nature that the Ubaid people depended upon and feared. These explanations fit a known pattern in human culture, where the blending of human and animal traits creates a powerful visual language for the divine or the ritualistic. Yet, the uniqueness of these figures within the Mesopotamian tradition gives pause. Later Sumerian, Akkadian, and Babylonian art is rich with animal hybrid creatures, like the lion-headed eagle or the scorpion people, but the specific, consistent motif of the lizard human engaged in nurturing is not seen again. This singularity invites deeper questions about the Ubaid worldview. What experience or belief was so powerful that it generated this unique artistic tradition, only for it to vanish completely as their culture evolved into the historical civilizations we know? The figurines challenge us to move beyond easy labels and sit with the discomfort of not knowing. They ask us to consider the possibility that the myths which shaped humanity's first steps out of prehistory were far stranger, more visceral, and more intimately tied to the animal world than we typically imagine. In their silent terracotta forms, they hold a baby, a symbol of the future, while wearing the face of a creature from a primordial past. This juxtaposition is a powerful metaphor for the Ubaid moment itself, a culture cradling the infant idea of civilization while still seeing the world through a lens where the boundaries between human, animal, and spirit were beautifully, terrifyingly fluid. Beneath the quiet farmlands of Zhejiang province in China, an entire underground world lay forgotten. In 1992, a local farmer decided to pump water out of a small, seemingly bottomless pond on his land, revealing not a natural pool, but the entrance to a colossal hand-carved cavern. This was the first glimpse of the Longyou Grottoes, a network of at least 24 immense artificial caves spread across a modest hillside. Stepping inside is like entering a subterranean palace. The scale is the first thing that overwhelms you. Each cavern is vast, some large enough to hold an airplane, with ceilings supported by massive, evenly spaced stone pillars that were clearly left in place as the rock around them was removed. The walls, ceiling, and pillars are all covered in a stunning, uniform pattern of parallel chisel marks, a meticulous herringbone design that sweeps across every surface like a master stonecutter's signature. This is not a rough-hewn cave, it is a carefully engineered space with flat floors, sharp 90-degree angles where walls meet, and slanted ceilings that follow a consistent pitch. The precision is breathtaking, and it is everywhere in every grotto, suggesting a single, governing vision and a standardized method of construction. The sheer volume of work is almost incomprehensible. Experts estimate that over 1 million cubic meters of solid sandstone were excavated by hand to create this complex. To put that in perspective, that is enough stone to fill over 200 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The labor required would have been monumental, demanding thousands of workers toiling for decades, all coordinated with the efficiency of a major state project. Yet, here lies the central, deafening silence. There is no mention of this titanic undertaking in any historical record, not a single scroll, poem, or imperial eddy from any Chinese dynasty that speaks of carving a mountain from the inside out. For a civilization known for its meticulous record-keeping, this omission is as puzzling as the caves themselves. Who ordered this? What was its purpose? The most logical theory is that it was a massive quarry. The consistent, high-quality sandstone could have been valuable for building projects, but this explanation feels incomplete. Why go to such extraordinary lengths to create beautiful, patterned interiors if you are just mining stone? A quarry is utilitarian, its walls are ragged. The Longyou Grottoes are artistry on a staggering scale, their surfaces finished with an aesthetic care that seems to serve no practical mining function. Other ideas point toward a secret imperial project, perhaps a hidden mausoleum complex or a ceremonial space for rituals that required complete seclusion. The aligned pillars and grand halls could support such a purpose, but again, the historical silence is baffling. How could a project of this magnitude, requiring so many resources and so many people, simply vanish from the collective memory of an entire culture? The grottos stand as a monument to organized labor lost to time. They hint at a chapter of dynastic ambition that was either deliberately erased or so catastrophically interrupted that its story died with its patrons. They force us to consider that the official histories we rely upon are narratives written by the survivors, chronicling the triumphs that endured. The Longyou Grottoes may represent a different kind of history, one of a colossal effort that was, for reasons we may never know, abandoned, sealed by water, and left to become a local legend about a bottomless pond. They are a physical echo of a forgotten command, a testament written not in ink, but in the negative space of 1,000,000 tons of missing stone, asking us who gets to decide what is remembered and what is left to silently fill with groundwater and mystery. The silent, carved halls of Longyou are a testament to what human hands can hide beneath the earth, but our own seas hold mysteries that even modern technology struggles to explain. In the year 2011, a team of Swedish ocean explorers were using sonar to scan the floor of the Baltic Sea, searching for historic shipwrecks. What appeared on their screens, however, was no sunken galleon. Lying at a depth of nearly 300 feet was a massive, circular object, roughly 60 meters in diameter. Its shape was bizarrely geometric, a distinct disk with a long, trailing ridge behind it, and its surface appeared to have straight lines, right angles, and what looked like stair-like structures. To many who saw the initial sonar image, the silhouette was uncannily familiar, bearing a striking resemblance to the Millennium Falcon from popular science fiction. This was the Baltic Sea Anomaly, and its discovery immediately ignited a firestorm of speculation across the globe. The most immediate and widely accepted explanation from geologists is a natural one. They point to the region's glacial history. During the last ice age, massive sheets of ice scraped across the bedrock of the Baltic Basin. As these glaciers retreated, they could have deposited large glacial erratics, boulders carried from distant locations, and the grinding action of ice could have sculpted unusual formations. A large, isolated deposit of basalt or other hard rock, shaped and then smoothed by millennia of underwater currents, could potentially create the strange, rounded shape and even some of the linear features visible on sonar. This geological explanation is both plausible and fits the known history of the area without requiring any extraordinary events. Yet, the stories from the dive team added layers of intrigue that resisted such a simple answer. They reported strange electromagnetic interference in the immediate vicinity of the object, with their satellite phones and some camera equipment malfunctioning as they passed over it. Furthermore, samples retrieved from the site were initially claimed to contain metals not typically found in natural formations, though later analyses often contradicted these claims. These ancillary reports, whether accurate or exaggerated, fed directly into the public's imagination. Could this be a sunken, ancient monument from a lost civilization, now submerged like a Baltic version of Yonaguni? Perhaps it was a secret World War II anti-submarine device, a forgotten piece of experimental technology resting on the seabed. Or, in the most dramatic interpretation, was it the remains of an unidentified craft, something not of this world? The Baltic Sea Anomaly is a quintessential modern mystery precisely because it sits at the intersection of new technology and ancient human curiosity. Advanced sonar gave us the image, but the internet and popular culture framed the debate, instantly linking it to iconic imagery from film and legend. It demonstrates how our tools for discovery have advanced, yet our interpretative frameworks remain powerfully shaped by the stories we already carry with us. This object, whether a quirky glacial leftover or something else, highlights that the deepest parts of our own planet are still a frontier. The ocean floor is less mapped than the surface of Mars, and every new sweep of sonar holds the potential to reveal something that challenges our understanding. The anomaly's enduring fascination is not necessarily about proving the existence of ancient astronauts or lost technology, but about the potent human desire to look into the unknown and wonder if, this time, we might have found something truly extraordinary. It represents the thrill of the unanswered question, a digital ghost image on a screen that invites us to keep exploring, reminding us that mystery is not just a relic of the past, but a living presence in the deep, dark waters of our present world. A geological feature can become a national epic, and a natural formation can be transformed into sacred scripture. Stretching for nearly 30 miles across the Palk Strait, a chain of limestone shoals and sandbanks connects the southeastern tip of India to the northwestern coast of Sri Lanka. From the vantage point of modern geography, this is Adam's Bridge, a shallow, submerged ridge that makes navigation difficult for large ships. But from the perspective of ancient story, this is something else entirely. It is Rama's Bridge, a central and miraculous element from the great Hindu epic, the Ramayana. Written over 2 millennia ago, the epic recounts the journey of Prince Rama to rescue his wife Sita from the demon king Ravana in Lanka. Facing the impassable ocean, Rama's devoted army of Vanaras, often described as a race of intelligent monkeys or forest dwellers, built a bridge to cross it. The text describes them writing Rama's name on stones and tossing them into the water where they floated, forming a causeway across the sea. This is not a minor detail, it is the climactic act that enables the story's resolution, a testament to faith, devotion, and collective effort immortalized in verse. For countless generations, this has been understood as sacred history, a literal account of a divine intervention in the physical world. Modern geological surveys present a different, yet no less fascinating, origin story. Scientists who have studied the structure describe it as a classic tombolo, a natural formation of sand and sediment deposited by currents over millennia, later cemented into limestone. Its alignment follows a known geological ridge, and its composition matches other natural features in the region. The scientific consensus is clear. This is a work of slow, patient natural forces, not a sudden construction by mythical beings. Yet, the bridge's uncanny linearity and the persistent cultural memory attached to it create a space where geology and legend engage in a profound dialogue. The debate is not really about whether an army of monkeys built it, but about something deeper, how human beings interpret the world around them. When ancient people looked at this striking, arrow-straight chain of islands breaking the surface of the sea, what did they see? They saw a feature so orderly, so conveniently placed between two landmasses, that it seemed to demand an explanation beyond random chance. In a world where the divine was intimately woven into the fabric of nature, the most logical explanation was that it was built. The landscape itself became proof of the story, and the story, in turn, gave the landscape its ultimate meaning and significance. This intertwining challenges historians and archaeologists in a unique way. It asks them to separate natural history from cultural narrative, not to disprove the myth, but to understand the human impulse that created it. The bridge is a powerful example of how pre-scientific societies used narrative to make sense of awe-inspiring geographical features. A mountain might be a fallen giant, a peculiar rock formation might be a petrified being, and a bridge across the sea could only be the work of gods and heroes. This process is not about recording literal fact, but about encoding values, ethics, and identity into the very terrain. To stand on the shore and look toward Sri Lanka is to stand at a crossroads of understanding. One path follows the tools of carbon dating and sediment analysis, revealing a planet's slow, creative power. The other path follows the rhythm of epic poetry, revealing a culture's need to find the heroic and the sacred in its surroundings. Rama's Bridge, or Adam's Bridge, does not force us to choose between these paths. Instead, it invites us to walk both, to appreciate the natural wonder of the formation, while respecting the monumental human achievement of the story that forever changed how it is seen. It reminds us that sometimes the most enduring legacy of a place is not what it is made of, but what it has come to mean. High on a windswept plateau overlooking the ancient Inca capital of Cuzco, a fortress of stone defies both gravity and explanation. The walls of Sacsayhuamán are not simply built, they are woven. A tapestry of granite blocks so immense and so perfectly joined they seem less like construction and more like a natural geological phenomenon shaped by a god's hand. The scale is the first assault on comprehension. Some of these stones are titans, the largest estimated to weigh over 120 tons, equivalent to a herd of 20 adult elephants. They were quarried from a site miles away, dragged up steep mountain terrain without the wheel or draft animals, and then lifted into position with an elegance that still baffles modern engineers. But the true miracle is in the joints. Each block, whether a modest cube or a sprawling 12-angled polygon, is uniquely shaped. Their faces are not flat planes, but subtly curved and recessed, locking into the neighboring stones with a three-dimensional puzzle-like precision. The fit is so exact that for centuries, locals have said not even a razor blade can slip between them, and this is no exaggeration. This precision, achieved without iron tools, mortar, or a written language, accomplished a feat modern concrete cannot match, surviving centuries of earthquakes that have toppled Spanish colonial structures built right beside them. The official history credits the Inca, and their achievement here is undeniable, a masterpiece of imperial power and astronomical alignment. Yet, the very perfection of the work whispers a haunting counterpoint. The Inca themselves, when asked by the Spanish conquistadors how such a place was built, reportedly said it was the work of a distant, mythical past, constructed not by them, but by giants or gods who could soften stone with a magical plant. This oral tradition opens a door to a profound alternative question. Could Sacsayhuamán be far older than we think, a foundational site that the Inca found, revered, and built upon? The style of masonry here, known as polygonal, is distinct from the more regular, rectangular stonework the Inca used in many of their other famous sites like Machu Picchu. This has led some researchers to look for parallels elsewhere, and they find them in startling places. Similar polygonal, mortarless, megalithic construction appears at sites separated by oceans and millennia, from the mysterious foundations at Ollantaytambo in Peru, to the Cyclopean walls of Mycenae in Greece, to the forgotten temples of ancient Egypt. This scattering of a specific, highly advanced technique across the globe presents a tantalizing puzzle. Is this simply a case of convergent engineering, where different cultures, faced with the same challenge of moving massive stones and building for eternity, independently arrived at the same brilliant solution? Or does it hint at something more interconnected, a thread of lost knowledge? The idea of a single, globe-trotting megalithic civilization is likely too simplistic, but the possibility of a disseminated school of thought, a shared understanding of geomancy, acoustics, or stonework passed along ancient trade routes cannot be entirely dismissed. Sacsayhuamán, therefore, stands as more than a fortress. It is a boundary stone in the landscape of history. On one side lies the incredible, documented achievement of the Inca Empire, a culture that mastered its environment with breathtaking skill. On the other side stretches the shadowy realm of possibility, where the origins of that mastery might be rooted in a deeper, older wisdom, repurposed by later hands. The walls do not give us a clear answer, they only offer their silent, immovable testimony. They ask us to consider whether the pinnacle of pre-Columbian engineering might also be a relic, a page from a much earlier chapter in the human story, carefully preserved and integrated into a new empire's claim to power, leaving us to wonder who the true architects of this stone symphony really were. These stones of Sacsayhuamán ask who might have built with such impossible precision, but deep within the earth of South Africa, miners have pulled objects from a time so distant it mocks all human history. From the Precambrian rock of the Transvaal, dated to an almost inconceivable 2.8 billion years old, they extracted hundreds of small, spherical objects. Known as the Klerksdorp Spheres or the grooved spheres, they are typically composed of minerals like pyrite or goethite. To the untrained eye, however, they look nothing like a random crystal formation. They are almost perfectly round, and most strikingly, many are encircled by 1, 2, or 3 parallel grooves etched cleanly around their equator, as if turned on a lathe. Their symmetry is so pronounced, their lines so deliberate, that the immediate, visceral reaction is to see a manufactured artifact, a tiny component from an ancient machine or a bearing from a device lost to deep time. The official geological explanation is both elegant and humbling. Geologists identify them as natural concretions. In this process, minerals can precipitate around a central nucleus in sedimentary rock, forming layered spheres. The parallel grooves, they explain, are the result of a natural phenomenon called crystal twinning, where the internal crystalline structure of the mineral creates planes of weakness. As the softer surrounding rock erodes away over eons, these harder spheres are exposed, and the crystalline planes can create the appearance of machined lines. It is a perfect demonstration of how the slow, patient artistry of geology can produce forms of startling regularity, forms that trick our human brains, which are wired to see design and intention. This explanation is grounded, testable, and fits within the vast, non-human narrative of our planet's formation. Yet, the spheres hold their mystery not in defiance of science, but in the profound philosophical questions they raise about time and perception. 2.8 billion years, when these spheres formed, life on Earth was at best single-celled microbes in a primordial sea. The continents were unrecognizable masses. The idea of a tool using intelligence on this planet is by every measure of mainstream science an absolute impossibility, so the spheres present us with a stark choice. We can accept them as a magnificent natural oddity, a testament to the fact that nature, given enough time, can create patterns so precise they mimic the work of hands we have not yet evolved. Or we can venture into far more speculative territory, considering if they might be evidence of a non-human technological presence visiting a young Earth, a notion that stretches the concept of ancient astronauts to a literally prehistoric extreme. But perhaps the most valuable lesson of the grooved spheres lies not in choosing between these options, but in the sheer cognitive shock they deliver. They force us to confront the dizzying scale of deep time, a timeline where billions of years pass, mountains rise and crumble to dust, and entire biological kingdoms emerge and vanish, all before the first vertebrate fish swims in the ocean. In that vastness, the line between a natural process and an artificial one becomes thrillingly blurred. These small, metallic orbs are messengers from an era before memory, before bone, before thought itself. They ask us to expand our imagination not just about who might have come before us, but about what constitutes a signature in the stone. Is a perfectly straight line always a sign of a maker, or can it also be the quiet, inevitable poetry of chemistry and time, writing its own story in a language we are only beginning to learn to read? The perfection of a sphere carved by geology stands in stark contrast to an object shaped entirely by human hands, yet shrouded in just as much mystery. Among the most visually captivating of all disputed artifacts are the crystal skulls. Carved from a single block of clear or milky quartz, these life-sized human skulls are objects of haunting beauty, their surfaces polished to a glass-like sheen that seems to hold light within. The most famous of these, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, was reportedly discovered in the 1920s by explorer F.A. Mitchell-Hedges during an excavation of a Mayan site in Belize. With its detachable jawbone and flawless, seemingly ancient craftsmanship, it was presented as a relic of a lost Mesoamerican world, a sacred object perhaps used by high priests for divination or communication with the spirit realm. Legends blossomed around it, suggesting it held psychic powers, could project holographic images, or was a data storage device from Atlantis. the skull became an icon, a symbol of everything mysterious and magical about the ancient past. It tapped directly into a deep cultural desire for objects that bridge our world with one of greater wisdom and power. However, the truth of its origins began to unravel under the cold, hard light of modern science. When researchers finally had the opportunity to examine several of the most prominent crystal skulls with high-powered microscopes, they made a critical discovery. The fine, precise tool marks left on the quartz were not consistent with the hand-powered abrasives and drills used by pre-Columbian artisans. Instead, they perfectly matched the rotary wheels and industrial polishing compounds of 19th-century European jewelry workshops. The evidence was overwhelming. These exquisite objects were almost certainly created in the 1800s, likely in Germany, during a period of fascination with the exotic and the antique. They were beautiful fakes, or perhaps more charitably, artistic creations sold as curiosities to a hungry market. This scientific verdict should have ended the story, but it did not. The legend of the crystal skulls refused to die. Why does an artifact, once debunked, retain such a powerful grip on the imagination? The answer lies not in the quartz itself, but in what it represents. The skulls are more than just carvings, they are perfect vessels for narrative. Their form is universally recognizable, a memento mori that speaks of life, death, and what may lie beyond. Their material, clear crystal, has long been associated in folklore with clarity, energy, and mystical vision. When you combine that form with that material and place it in the context of a mysterious jungle civilization, you create an object that feels inherently sacred and significant. Its debunking as an ancient artifact does nothing to diminish its power as a modern myth. The crystal skull phenomenon is a masterclass in how history, both real and imagined, is constructed. It shows how a compelling object can generate its own story, one that spreads through popular books, films, and documentaries, becoming embedded in our cultural consciousness as a fact. This process highlights a fascinating tension. On one side is rigorous archaeology, which must follow evidence, even when it leads to a disappointing or mundane conclusion. On the other side is a public yearning for wonder, for tangible connections to a past that feels grander and more enigmatic than the one in textbooks. The skulls satisfy that yearning perfectly. They demonstrate that sometimes the most enduring legacy of an artifact is not its historical authenticity, but the role it plays in our collective psyche. They remind us that we are storytellers at heart, and we will often choose the beautiful, mysterious tale over the prosaic fact, keeping the magic alive long after the science has had its final say. A desert now holds the memory of water and of figures that seem to walk out of a dream. Deep within the Tassili Ennaja plateau of the Algerian Sahara, a vast open-air gallery of rock art covers the walls of sandstone shelters. Created over millennia by Neolithic peoples, these paintings are a breathtaking window into a lost world, one where the Sahara was a green savanna teeming with life. We see graceful depictions of giraffes, elephants, and herds of cattle, scenes of hunting, dancing, and communal rituals. These are the records of a thriving culture, a vivid chronicle of daily existence. Yet scattered among these familiar scenes are figures that stop the modern viewer cold. They are humanoid, but their forms are strange. Some have large, perfectly round heads with no discernible facial features, while others appear to be encased in bulky, rounded suits. To an eye accustomed to 20th century imagery, the resemblance is startling. They look like astronauts in pressurized suits or divers in cumbersome helmets. This visual echo has sparked one of the most enduring speculative debates in alternative history. Are these paintings literal records of encounters with otherworldly visitors, or advanced beings sharing knowledge with ancient tribes? The mainstream archaeological interpretation offers a profoundly different, yet equally rich reading. scholars point to the universal human practice of ritual adornment and symbolic representation. The round heads, they argue, are likely masks, perhaps made of ostrich eggs or woven material, used in ceremonies to embody spirits, ancestors, or deities. The bulky suits could represent stylized ceremonial garments, heavy with beads, feathers, or symbolic padding, meant to denote status or a transformative spiritual state. In many indigenous cultures worldwide, donning a special costume is a way for a shaman or ritual participant to leave their ordinary self behind and become a conduit for the sacred. What we see as a helmet might be a crown of power. What we see as a breathing apparatus might be a stylized beard or a ritual mouthpiece. The paintings, then, are not documentaries but sacred art, using a symbolic visual language to express concepts of the supernatural, the divine, and the transition between worlds. This clash of interpretations is not really about the paintings themselves, but about the lens through which we view them. It is a perfect case study in how our own technological context shapes our understanding of the past. Living in an age of space exploration, we naturally project those iconic silhouettes onto any ancient image that bears a passing resemblance. We see a spacesuit because that is a powerful symbol in our modern mythology. The original artists, however, lived in a world where the greatest mysteries were the cycles of rain, the movements of animals, and the forces of life and death. Their powerful symbols would have drawn from that environment, not from a vocabulary of technology they could not conceive. The true challenge of Tassili Enaja lies in this act of translation. It asks us to step outside our own cultural framework and try to see the world as the artists did. The strange figures were likely meant to inspire awe, fear, and reverence in their original viewers, to communicate something about the nature of spiritual power. When we reduce them to literal astronauts, we may actually be diminishing their original, profound meaning. We trade a complex, spiritually rich narrative for a simpler, more sensational one. Yet, the very persistence of the astronaut theory reveals a deep human desire. It reflects our hope that the ancients witnessed wonders as grand as those we aspire to today, and that the story of humanity is interwoven with cosmic visitors. Whether we see ritual masks or space helmets, these silent figures on the desert rock hold a mirror to our own times. They remind us that every generation looks at the artifacts of the past and sees, to some degree, a reflection of its own dreams, its own fears, and its own unanswered questions about who we are and where we come from. The very ground beneath our feet can become a battleground for history itself. In the highlands of West Java, Indonesia, a place called Gunung Padang rises from the landscape. To the casual observer, it is a lush, terraced hill covered in grass and scattered with ancient columns of volcanic rock. Local tradition has long held it as a sacred site. For mainstream archaeology, it has been classified as a fascinating but relatively straightforward megalithic complex, with stone terraces and structures dating back perhaps 2,000 or 3,000 years, built upon a natural geological formation. This interpretation fits comfortably within the established timeline for the region. Yet, a small group of researchers has put forward a claim so radical it threatens to tear that timeline apart. They propose that Gunung Padang is not a hill adorned with stones, but something far more profound, the remains of a colossal, multi-layered pyramid constructed in deep antiquity. Their most startling assertion is its age. Through a combination of controversial drilling samples, ground-penetrating radar scans, and other remote sensing data, they suggest the structure's deepest layers could be up to 20,000 years old. If true, this would not merely push back the clock for Indonesian history, it would catapult it into an era when, according to conventional science, humans across the globe were nomadic hunter-gatherers, their most complex structures being temporary shelters. The idea of a pyramid built during the last ice age, in what is now a tropical jungle, is a direct challenge to every textbook on the rise of civilization. The evidence at the heart of this controversy is technological and deeply contested. Proponents point to radar images that seem to show large, hollow chambers and artificial layers deep within the hill, far below the visible surface terraces. They cite core samples containing what they interpret as worked stone and adhesive materials at astonishing depths. The mainstream geological and archaeological response has been one of intense skepticism. Critics argue the radar data is being misinterpreted, that the apparent chambers are natural geological features like lava tubes or fissures. They contend the materials retrieved from deep drilling are simply the product of natural weathering and volcanic processes, not human craftsmanship. The soil dating, they say, may reflect the age of the hill itself, not the age of any construction. This is not a quiet academic disagreement. It is a very public and passionate clash over methods, interpretation, and the very rules of evidence. Gunung Padang has become a symbol of a modern tension in uncovering the past. On one side are researchers using cutting-edge tools to look beneath the surface, literally and figuratively, arguing that new technology can reveal truths that traditional excavation might miss. On the other side is the established discipline, which insists that extraordinary claims require extraordinary and rigorously validated proof. The site tests the scientific community's openness to ideas that could dismantle foundational narratives about human development in Southeast Asia and beyond. It asks a difficult but essential question: how do we responsibly investigate a claim that, if verified, would change everything? Do we dismiss it because it seems impossible within our current framework, or do we commit to a painstaking, transparent, and collaborative investigation to prove or disprove it once and for all? Gunung Padang sits quietly, its secrets still buried, a verdant hill that may be the world's oldest pyramid, or simply a beautiful testament to the power of nature and later human reverence. Its true story is still being written layer by contested layer in the soil and stone. There is a plateau in Laos where the earth itself seems to have forgotten why it holds what it does. Across the rolling grasslands of Xingquang, thousands of massive stone jars lie scattered, as if abandoned by giants after some incomprehensible task. Carved from solid sandstone and granite, some stand as tall as a person and weigh several tons, their open mouths gazing eternally at the sky. They cluster in groups from a handful to several hundred, dotting the landscape in a pattern that feels deliberate, yet whose logic has been utterly lost. These are the Plain of Jars, and their silent presence poses a riddle that spans from 500 years before the Common Era to 500 years after. A full millennium of use for a purpose we can no longer decipher. The most persistent theory is that they served as part of an ancient burial tradition. Within and around some jars, archaeologists have uncovered human remains, ash, and grave goods like beads and iron tools. This suggests a practice where the deceased were placed inside these monumental urns, perhaps after a sky burial or cremation, their physical essence collected in a vessel meant to endure forever. The jars, then, would not be storage containers for grain or water, but permanent resting places, communal memorials that anchored a community to its ancestors across generations. Yet, other researchers point out that not every jar contains such evidence. Could they have had a dual purpose, used first for fermenting food or storing supplies for large ceremonial gatherings, and only later repurposed for memorials? The sheer labor involved in quarrying, shaping, and transporting these monoliths speaks to a powerful cultural imperative, a need so great it commanded the movement of mountains. Unraveling this mystery, however, is fraught with a danger far more immediate than the passage of centuries. During the Vietnam War, the Xingquang Plateau became one of the most heavily bombed regions on Earth. Millions of cluster munitions were dropped, and a tragic percentage failed to detonate on impact. To this day, vast areas around the jar sites remain contaminated with unexploded ordnance, a lethal harvest sown in the soil. This means that simply walking between the jars to conduct a survey can be a life-threatening act. Large sections of the plain are still strictly off-limits, their secrets guarded not by time alone, but by the deadly remnants of a modern conflict. This juxtaposition creates a profound and somber layer to the mystery. The Plain of Jars stands as a stark reminder that the puzzles of archaeology are not always locked away by millennia. Sometimes they are sealed shut by the very recent past. The struggle to understand this lost culture is now inextricably linked with the ongoing work of bomb disposal teams, who clear a few more meters of ground each year so that researchers can safely take a few more steps. It is a race against a different kind of time, one where healing the landscape is the first step toward reading it. These silent stone sentinels, therefore, represent more than an ancient enigma. They embody the ongoing challenge of piecing together the human story in regions scarred by contemporary hardship. They ask us to consider how many other sites, how many other whispers from the past remain unheard because the ground that holds them is still trembling from the echoes of recent strife. The jars hold their silence, waiting not just for an answer to why they were made, but for the day when the land around them is finally, fully at peace. Stepping back from these individual mysteries reveals a larger, more profound pattern. The Antikythera Mechanism, the Baghdad Battery, the polygonal walls of Sacsayhuamán, and the celestial maps on the ceiling at Dendera are not isolated quirks. They are echoes of the same recurring themes, whispers of a past where humanity's relationship with knowledge followed a rhythm far different from the steady climb we have long accepted. We see a persistent fascination with the stars, translated into precise mechanical models and stone alignments. We find evidence of materials science, from unusual aluminum alloys to vitrified stone, hinting at experimentation with natural forces. Most strikingly, we encounter a global language of megaliths, where cultures separated by oceans and millennia chose to move mountains, to shape 100-ton stones with impossible precision, and to build for eternity. This collective portrait challenges the very foundation of the standard narrative. It does not demand we swap one simple story for another, like replacing a tale of slow progress with a saga of ancient astronauts. Instead, it invites us into a far richer, more complicated landscape. The evidence suggests that human ingenuity is not a single flame passed carefully from one age to the next. It is more like a field of fireflies flashing brilliantly in one era and place, then fading, only for new lights to ignite elsewhere, sometimes independently, sometimes perhaps sparked by an ember carried on an ancient trade wind. The Piri Reis Map hints at such a carried ember, a fragment of a sailor's chart copied and recopied until its origin was forgotten. The stylistic similarities in polygonal masonry across the world might reflect a convergent solution to a universal engineering problem, or they could point to a disseminated school of thought that traveled along routes we no longer remember. What emerges from these 30 fragments is a powerful argument for intellectual humility. Our modern timeline is a best guess, a framework built from the evidence that has survived the relentless filters of time, decay, and cultural collapse. The Voynich Manuscript reminds us that some knowledge was deliberately encoded and then lost. Göbekli Tepe proves that our causal sequence of events can be completely backwards. The Yonaguni Monument and the Baltic Sea Anomaly whisper that entire chapters of human endeavor may lie submerged, literally and figuratively, beyond our current reach. This collection does not hand us a new, complete textbook. Instead, it hands us a key, one that unlocks a more flexible, more curious way of looking at the dust of ages. It asks us to consider a past punctuated by peaks of achievement that were later abandoned, by networks of exchange that frayed and vanished, and by brilliant, local innovations that never became a global standard. The story of humanity, as told by these out-of-place artifacts, is not a straight line. It is a sprawling, interconnected web with many of its most dazzling threads still waiting to be found. The journey through these 30 outliers leaves us not with a simple answer, but with a profound appreciation for the beautifully messy story of humanity. Each artifact, from the clockwork of Antikythera to the silent jars of Laos, represents a crack in the smooth facade of our historical timeline. Some of these cracks may be sealed by future research, explained as hoaxes, natural formations, or brilliant but isolated innovations. Others may deepen, widening into doorways that lead us to entirely new chapters we never knew existed. Yet regardless of their final classification, every single one serves an essential purpose. They are the persistent sparks that keep the flame of curiosity burning. In a world that often demands neat categories and definitive answers, these mysteries remind us that the past is not a static exhibit behind glass, but a dynamic, living field of inquiry. A single object pulled from the earth or the sea can unravel decades of scholarly consensus, proving that our understanding is always provisional, always awaiting the next discovery. To question the established narrative, then, is not an act of rebellion against science, but its purest expression. It is the very heart of the scientific spirit, the refusal to accept a story as complete when new evidence whispers from the soil. It is the drive that sent explorers across oceans, that inspired inventors to peer through lenses, and that now compels us to look deeper into the layers of time itself. So as we reflect on these stones, maps, and mechanisms, we are left with a thrilling and humbling question. What other secrets lie buried, not in distant, exotic lands, but perhaps beneath the very ground we walk on every day? What future discovery will be the one that forces us to tear a page from the textbook and start writing a new one? The search is far from over. New technologies are allowing us to see through stone, scan the ocean floor, and read faded inks invisible to the human eye. Each tool promises to reveal more of these whispers, more fragments of a story grander and more intricate than we have yet dared to imagine. Perhaps the greatest treasure uncovered by this exploration is not a single artifact, but a renewed sense of wonder, the realization that our shared history is still being written and that we all have a role to play as its curious readers. If this journey into history's hidden corners has sparked your imagination, consider joining us for more. Subscribe to continue unraveling the world's greatest mysteries, and let us know in the comments which of these 30 finds you find most compelling and why. The conversation, like the search itself, is just beginning.